Hello, my name is Colleen Getty, and I'm from The Room to Write, and we're here with the Journey of a Story series, and we're talking to Kari Percival and taking a look at her book, How to Say Hello to a Worm. Welcome, Kari.
Thank you so much for having me, Colleen. It's a huge honor to be here today.
Excited to chat with you today. So we'll kick it off the way we always do with just asking you, what does it look like for you to be writing? And you're a wonderful illustrator as well. So it'd be great for the audience to picture, do you have a studio? Do you just squirrel away in the corner of your living room? Like so many of us, what does you writing and creating look like?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, this book is really particular because it came about because I was leading a little group in my local community garden to teach toddlers and preschoolers how to garden. Actually, it was for all families, anyone who wanted to join me. But I did notice that the kids who were most engaged and most riveted by planting seeds and watering them and came back most often, like their parents brought them back, were kids from like ages 1 to 3 or 4. So I started designing my, activities and lessons for kids that age. And I would make these little kind of, there'd be a lot going on. There'd kind of be a pickup activity when you first came in. And then there'd be the main lesson, which would be something that took 3 minutes, but,
Right.
And then there'd be lots of playtime in the mud built in. And then there would be a story time for wrap up.
Okay.
So
your creating really started with actually creating a garden.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And actually, like, the writing for the book came about when I would be like, okay, what do people need to know to get started here? So some things they might need to know would be like how to plant strawberries in a pot. Sometimes we'd have strawberries like would escape from the garden, so we'd dig them out and I'd say, okay, today, we have these yogurt containers and you can make a little strawberry garden to bring home, and
Yep.
so I'd have the instructions on like a clipboard. And so I did that with lots of little themes, like how to pick a strawberry, how to say hello to a worm, basics that how to plant peas, just basics that you need to know when you're doing something. So I'd have something to show people with the steps and pictures and
Right.
so it was a
So
learning.
you were already basically writing in your instruction.
Right. So the writing for the book, for this book anyway, it was an unusual process because it came directly from my teaching and for me making teaching materials for the activities that were very for the very young, and thinking like, okay, we have these toddlers where you got to meet them where they're at,
Right.
and what are they interested in, what their questions are, and how do they dive in, and get started learning.
Yeah. So you almost had your real life editorial critique team right there as little gardeners because you knew what language to use and how they reacted to things. That's
Yes,
awesome.
exactly. So, keeping sentences short and using simple words that were easy to understand I already had a lot of experience with that, with this topic. So
that's awesome.
It was really easy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think that's a great tip. Even just we have a good amount of people who write that are teachers or were teachers that are retired.
Yeah.
And to think of it as maybe your teaching lesson was your rough draft to a future picture book or chapter book. So that's really interesting.
Oh yeah, exactly. I went to Antioch, New England Graduate School, and for environmental science and general science teaching for middle school science.
Okay.
So I learned inquiry-based teaching, which is where you start with, instead of, having a book and teaching people directly, like teacher to student, direct instruction, you put the phenomena between you and the student. So, and then you coach the student on how to ask questions and how to make observations and how to test inferences with more observations. So that really ignites student passion, and then they can learn the vocabulary and learn the facts. And when they, when you go in with the words, they have something to relate to and be excited by, and questions that really motivate their learning. So.
Right. And I mean, what's more tangible than actually them being able to get their hands dirty in the garden?
Yes, definitely.
So when did you start your garden group, and when did you decide, maybe I should create a picture book from that?
Oh, yeah. I started gardening, I want to say my youngest was like 1, so that was 9 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I was offered a plot. They just started the community garden, and they offered me a plot, and I thought, well, that's great, but I don't want to garden alone, you know. And I had brought my oldest son down there when he was a toddler to that area because it was the closest area. It was old train tracks that were abandoned, and it was the closest area where you could go and look at butterflies and wildflowers, and, you know, it was kind of abandoned. Yeah. And then they ripped all that out to put a bike path, and I was like, oh, that was our butterfly area, you know. And they're like, well, we're putting in a community garden. Do you want a plot? And I was like, okay. But so because I had used that space or thought of it as kind of a nature learning lab, when they put the community garden in, I thought, well, this could be a nature learning lab for growing food. That's really important for young families and kids to learn and try. And I certainly don't want to just do it alone. Like, that's kind of, I was worried I would never get down there, actually. So if I had, invited people to show up with me and had little activities, then it was, you know, kind of more of a social time.
Public accountability goes a long way with creating, right?
Yeah. And then people would sign up to help with the watering, and we would all harvest together. So
that's awesome.
It was really meaningful.
Yeah. And so how many, did just days go by and you were like, I'm going to turn this into a book, or did years go by, or when did you decide, okay, I'm going to take this to an actual book?
Sure. At the same time, I had been working on becoming a children's book writer and submitting my dummies, and, you know, picture book dummies and manuscripts to editors and agents, and around the same time, I think 2017. I was able to get an agent. And so I was still gardening, and my agent knew about the gardening. And she knows the market. And she's like, what if you wrote like a how to garden book for toddlers? And I was like, it was so
obvious
close to me that I hadn't thought of writing a book like that.
Yeah.
I'm like, you mean like this, blah, blah, blah? And she's like, yeah, like that. And I'm like, it was so easy because I'd been living it, like, as you said. Yeah. So, you know, it just tumbled out. I could have written 3 of them on that. You know what I mean? Like, it was not a stretch in any way. So
low hanging fruit, not to
exactly,
put a pun out there.
And I remember reading an article about how small children like to see pictures of themselves. They like to see pictures of kids doing things, like full bodies, like their whole body, seeing, you know, kids doing things like them. So they could be like that, you know, like me, you know, that's kind of the. So I wrote the book thinking of having lots of images of kids, you know, doing things.
Awesome.
Getting their hands in the dirt and pouring water and planting seeds and everything. So.
And it helps that you are also the illustrator. So what came easiest, or did they both come out at the same time, the words or the images? Yeah,
the sketches, like, you know, I'm a very visual person. So when I'm writing, often there's images that are in my mind. So they're, it's kind of together. And a lot of the imagery was based on the little info sheets I made, you know, those little tutorial sheets, just like, you know, what to do and, you know, just to catch people's interest and make people be able to relate to the picture. Right. Like this one, this page is how do you pick a strawberry? And the kids are all pointing to the different strawberries that aren't ready yet and saying, this one, not yet, too green, you know, until they get to the one that's ripe. And I made a version of this on just a piece of paper, you know, it was on a clipboard, you know, with a plastic sleeve, you know, so it wouldn't get wet. And
that's awesome.
So then when I went to make the pictures, you know, it was, again, when I teach, I use a lot of visuals, so that people can connect more quickly. So.
Yeah, and even as an adult gardener, like, it's helpful to see what is ripe because, like you said, there's, you know, oh, well, it's got a lot of pink, but not, you know, I think that it's just, I don't know, it just really helps with the young people and the old, like myself.
Yeah, so, like, here's another one. It's just like a visual tutorial of the steps of what to do.
That's awesome.
So, of planting a pea.
I love that.
Yeah.
So you have the words, you get the images. How did matching up the images you had sketched for your actual garden club work out when it came to getting the finished product for your book? Was it just add color or?
No, I mean, I did draw a dummy, which is, you put all the images together with the words and mess around with it. And I think that, my first couple drafts were edited quite a bit. My agent had a lot of ideas on editing it before she submitted it to editors. And then, editors had ideas once they bought the book. They had a lot of ideas of how to change things around and change the order around and cut things and add things and things. So they had a lot of style choices they wanted to add. So
so your agent was also sort of an editorial agent, and then it went to an actual editor at the publisher. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and my agent's wonderful. Her because she was an artistic director for Viking children's books, so she knows. She's really good with just how the images and words work together, and she's not shy about that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so a dummy is basically a sketch of the final product that you turn in.
Yeah, it's a sketch. They don't want to see. People have this misapprehension with the illustrations that they have to turn in something with all the illustrations full color, fully done, final draft, and that's definitely not the case.
Okay.
The editors just want to see sketches because they want to feel like it's still flexible and they could have a lot of input. So if it's all done up perfectly, then they would be scared off. Like, this person's going to be too nitpicky. They won't let us put our stamp on it. So So they like to see the sketches. They like to see that it's still in a flexible state. They also like to see a couple sample art pieces in the full art style that you're going to do
with the color and everything.
Yeah. Okay. Just like 2 or 3.
Right. And so does that go in the dummy, or is that like a separate thing that
usually
you attach?
It's a separate file just to keep the file small.
Okay. So you have your agent look, the editors. What's the process / timeline for going from, okay, here's the first draft to everybody's happy with it?
Well, usually, it really depends. It depends if they expedite your book and they want it out, really fast for some reason to go with some current events, or if, they might be in the middle of a bunch of other projects and things, they change the dates. So further out and further out.
Right.
So it really depends. It depends on
and how about
a lot
this
of factors.
Book in particular, was this like on the expedite list, or was it taking its time like a little seed growing?
No, it took a long time. I don't remember exactly.
That long.
I'm sorry.
It was
but it's long. Very, because where I was my other job before being an illustrator and a writer was to be a teacher. And with being a teacher, it's every day you're on and you're producing content every day, and you're getting a ton of feedback fast. If you're a middle school teacher, you teach the same class 5 times. So, the first time you do it to the last time, you're like, you change a lot of stuff to make it good, better, right? And so it's kind of fun. It's kind of a buzz to get that instant feedback and be able to change it. And it's kind of like air traffic controller or something, and how many decisions you need to make in a day and interactions. So it's a little too much in a way, but it can be. So going from that to going to the book publishing industry is it's very different. Yeah. It's a very different timeline. So it's much less interaction, and so I'm still getting the hang of that.
Okay. And even though I don't always read all the books that come in here, I did read this, and I absolutely love it.
Oh, thanks.
But one thing I wanted you to point out that I think is super cool, too, is that the art on the actual paper cover is different from the cover. I just think that's
called a case cover. The case cover is different. I'll show you if you can see. Yeah, the case cover is different. So this is the outside of the book, and then inside the cover is it shows on the front is a bunch of seed packets, and I had so much fun drawing the seed packets and coming up with the names of the seed companies, and that was super fun. And then on the back, it's supposed to be all those the produce that was produced. So on the front, there's a tiny strawberry seedling, and on the back, there's a whole bunch of strawberries. And on the front, there's little seed packets. And then on the back, there's all the lettuce and peas and carrots that were grown. Sort of abundance fills up the page. So that's kind of fun.
And so do they, I know I've heard of like the inside art, but I don't think I had ever seen it so different like that. Is that something that always happens, or did you request that, or did your agent?
No, this was their idea, and they had ideas about what it would be. So
yeah, I love that.
I was like, okay, sure.
I had a nice little surprise.
Yeah, it's a fun surprise. So, and they don't always do that, but it's kind of like designers love to do that. And if they get the chance, it's kind of a trendy thing. It's called an undie. It's called an undie.
Okay.
But it's called a case cover, technically.
All right.
But also the back, they had fun with the idea of having the barcode be like the seed, like a seed label.
Oh, cute.
So
I hadn't even noticed that. That's awesome.
And the whole image is sort of a wraparound image.
The kids in the garden. So. Yeah, that's fun. And since they had an in with the illustrator, you were able to just crank those out, I'm sure. I don't know if you want to talk at all. I'll leave it up to you in terms of the producing the art at all, or if you want to skip that and go to some of the awards that this wonderful book got.
Well, I'll just say one thing about the art, or two things. One thing is that I was really into the botany. I loved drawing all the plants. And it was funny because when I got notes back on my sketch dummy, they had someone look at it and they're like, well, these, strawberry leaves are supposed to be toothed. And I was just like, oh, yes, of course I knew. Like, I knew, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so I just sketched them, really kind of rough.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, of course, obviously, of course. But, of course, I hadn't communicated that. I knew what different plants look like, but in my sketches. But, it was just so fun to draw all the different plants. And I also had fun with the character. It was so fun to see the characters coming through. And, I did kind of like an imaginary casting call of different characters. And it was hard because, more showed up than I got to use. So I had to cut some people, and I didn't like to do that. But I think we decided on 8 kids that just reappear in the story. So it's kind of like it could be a class or a group or, something.
That's awesome. Oh, and did you want to point out what's in the back there?
All the kids in the back.
The back, I think they call
the
it
back matter. Yeah, the back matter is the end of the book. There's information. So there's information for kids. Do you want to grow your own fruits and vegetables? And it just has a few little tips. And here's what you'll need, and what should you grow, and what's easy to grow, and where will it grow best. So, and then I have a little few notes for grown-ups. Why garden with toddlers? Is it worth the mess?
Yes, right? I'm sure.
And what if kids want to dig and play in the plantings? And is my child big enough to garden? How little's too little? And garden safety. So there's just some great tips in the back to help people feel comfortable.
I loved that because, even though it's for the kids, it's the parents that either have to go along with this or not. And
Yes. And a lot of people are intimidated by, the mess and, like, what if things go wrong or what if things don't grow? Like, I think, people get intimidated because there's experts who tell you, oh, you have to do this and that. And you feel intimidated by just starting. But small children know that it's so exciting. So if you're not sure what you're doing, like, you can just kind of ride their coattails and get into it. And there's nothing to lose and everything to gain by trying to grow food. It's just magical, and it really connects children with a deep understanding of how we're connected to our ecosystem. We're connected, we need that sunshine to grow on that food so that we can feed ourselves.
Right.
And we need the rain to water our plants or we can help water them and nurture them. So it's like establishing all these relationships.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point that you talk about with just even keeping it simple. Because everything, I feel like these days, is overwhelming with all the information, all the experts giving all sorts of advice. And that's what I think is
Right.
another superpower about this book is it takes very specific things. It doesn't just say a random, like, a seed. It tells you, like, a pea plant or a, lettuce seed or whatever.
Right.
And you walk them through it very specifically. And you didn't get overwhelmed yourself thinking, oh, well, I don't want to leave this plant out. You picked the ones that you picked, and probably the ones you've planted with the kids the most, or maybe you've seen the best reactions.
Well, I chose plants. For this book, I chose plants that were all edible, and that were fast-growing and early spring garden plants.
And why is that?
Because the kids, the little toddlers and preschoolers, they want results fast. And it's exciting to come back every week and see, the difference in the plants and see the progression between April 1st and the end of June. You really need plants that are done because everyone goes away for the summer. People are going on trips, and they're not there for those late harvests as much. I noticed over the years, at least in my program. Other programs, I'm sure, figure it out. But when I noticed there was a big rush in the early spring. People were cooped up all winter. They really, it was like they were passionate about getting their hands in the dirt and planting seeds. And so I just chose species of and varieties of food to grow that would come up fast and produce fast and were all edible. Like for peas, you can eat the greens. You can eat the tendrils, you can eat the leaves, you can eat the pods. It's all fine. Strawberries, they're the same, and lettuce and carrots. So they're all edible. There's no like poisonous part of the plant. So I chose them very specifically because I planted all different things with kids, but I chose the plants to be this book was supposed to be an early spring gardening for the very young.
Yeah, and I love that it's for very young. I remember going, and I think main point of you writing this is I remember going to my daughter's preschool and a lot of the kids were almost afraid to handle the dirt and stuff because they're just used to having to wash their hands, especially after COVID. And this is before COVID even happened. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about, like, I think you mentioned you specifically, those were the young ages to do it for. Any particular reason, or is that just it? The earlier the better? And
that age, I think. Well, as I mentioned, like I noticed those are the kids that were really riveted by the whole thing and who came back, and were really into it. The ages like 1 to 3, really. And
then what happens after?
I think it's a developmental stage that if they get to garden before then, they really have this deep understanding of nature and our connection to nature. That if they're kept indoors all that time, they just don't form that early bond. And I think why it's a developmental thing is I think that's an age of where children are weaning, and so they're moving from milk to a diet of plants and food that we grow, and so it's extremely empowering for them to learn how to grow food because they're going from a totally dependent situation to one where they are empowered to grow food and provide food and share food with their family, like harvest food. Like kids would get so proud of themselves to be able to like dig up potatoes and bring them home to Papa to make dinner. Like it was really made them feel valuable to the community and like they were learning something so important to nourish themselves and their family. Like, kids, like a lot of children's toys and stuff are about like imagination and play and imaginative play, which I love. I'm totally not opposed to that at all. But this is like real, and the seriousness and gravity with which they just went about these tasks, it just showed me even more how important it is to them for that age group.
Right.
And I think if you get beyond 4, there's some developmental switch 4-year-olds have where you might have noticed with your own kids, when the kids are turned 4, they all start freaking out about something. Like some start freaking out about like volcanoes or hurricanes or spiders or, they
being overwhelmed.
Some things clicks on in their mind where they see, bigger world out there. And so, and they get, they realize there's things to be frightened of. You know what I mean? So that's why it's all the more important to do this work with them when they're small, before they're so that they feel like the earth is their friend.
Yeah.
And it's not something to be frightened of or recoil in disgust or anything. It's important to our being alive in the world.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That makes total sense the way that you explain it. Because, you're thinking, oh, they're so young, are they old enough to garden? And it's like, yeah, if they can stick their finger in the dirt, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So, no, I love that. So you have your book, you've published it, and want to talk a little bit about those stickers on the front. I know you had a few awards that this book has gotten.
Yes, the awards were just rolling in on this book, so I'm very amazed and excited and just humbled by all the positive attention this book has got. So the first one on this, I think I got the CLEL Bell Award, which is Colorado Librarians for Early Literacy, and it won the Talk Award from them. They have different awards: read, write, sing, talk, and play. And because this book models asking questions and connecting, and it models how to say hello to a worm and how to say hello to a bee and how to plant seeds and asking questions like, how do you do this and how do you do this? So I think I'm guessing that's why it was chosen, because it models very simply like this very empowering use of language to find things out.
Right.
And scientific inquiry is like using your own mind and own questions to like a divining rod to like find something out that's unfathomable that maybe you didn't know before.
Right.
And so using language to do this is extremely powerful for young people. So I'm really pleased I got that award.
Okay, right.
That's
an interesting category I didn't know existed.
Yes, it's very cool. And then then it showed up on the notables list from the Association for Library Services to Children, the American Library Association.
Okay.
So that was exciting. It got chosen for the Dolly Parton Imagination Library for early literacy.
And what is that?
Dolly Parton, she runs an early literacy program because where she grew up in Appalachia, a lot of people didn't have access to libraries. A lot of people were illiterate, and even her own dad didn't know how to read. And she thought he was, extremely wise and very caring and hardworking, and he never learned to read. So when she grew up and became successful, she decided to really address this problem, and she found out that learning to read early, exposure to books from age 0 to 5, really makes a difference in making sure that children learn to read. So
right.
So
it's
she
that same age category as the gardening too,
right,
huh?
Exactly.
Yeah,
so I'm really pleased that it became part of that program, because you can sign up, and if there's a program is working in your area, they'll send you free books for your child ages 0 to 5 once a month.
That's awesome. Love Dolly. She's the best.
So it's a huge honor to be part of that program.
Yeah.
And
then
one last
gold.
one is the sticker here, which is the Ezra Jack Keats Award, which was really kind of bowled me over, and I went to Mississippi to accept the award, and here's the award.
Yay.
And I brought it in to show you.
That's awesome.
And
what is that one? What's that award about or entail?
Well, Ezra Jack Keats, his estate, his books are still being published. A Snowy Day and Whistle for Willie are still very popular books, and so they're still in print. And so a foundation was founded in his name to use the money to do good things in the world.
And this is one of them, publishing books.
So, a committee, I think there's 10 people on the committee. They're made up of librarians, teachers, writers, and illustrators. And they get together and they choose they want to encourage people to write books that that celebrate diversity and celebrate children's and respect children's curiosity and innate intelligence and
curious minds.
Yeah. So 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 they chose this. They give out awards, one writer award and one illustrator award, and then they give out a few honors for both.
Okay.
So I was very busy the weekend that I heard. I was doing this environmental teach-in to end. Well, it was in a race. It was a teach-in to end environmental racism in my city, and I had been going to this and doing this work over the weekend. So I didn't really check my email. It was the weekend, and I was doing this event, and so I opened my email like Monday or something after the event, or Sunday night or something, and I saw they had written to me and said, "Oh, you got nominated for both illustrator and writer for as Jack Keats." And then, like, 2 emails next, they were like, "Oh, and you won." So so I didn't have to sit around waiting and biting my nails. So that was really amazing.
Wow.
So,
Congratulations.
thank you.
That is awesome.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well deserved.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm totally humbled. And I mean, there's so many amazing books published every year. And they give this one to somebody who's like their debut picture book, or a book they just wrote that's like one of their first 3 books, like, early in their career.
Right.
They're trying to encourage writers and illustrators early in their career, because when you first start out, it's kind of a big uphill. And
Right.
so the people they've chosen, a lot of them have gone on to have amazing careers, and I've kind of been following them, even before I got this award. So I knew it meant a lot to me to get it, because I knew the people who'd gotten it before, and I was really inspired by their work.
Yeah. Well, hopefully people will be inspired to garden and to write by your work. We're running low on time. I wanted to ask quickly, do you have any projects in the works that you can talk about, or just head down writing and illustrating?
Sure. My next book is called Safe Crossing, and it's with Chronicle Books. And it's about a citizen science family who's helping frogs and salamanders across the street during their spring migration. And it's for older children. It's not part of this genre so much. But also I have a lot of other books that I've written, manuscripts that I'm sending out on submission. So if anybody's listening who wants to publish another one of my books, get in touch with my agent. There's some undiscovered gems there. So.
All right. That's awesome. So for your parting words, any words of inspiration or encouragement to writers out there, or illustrators, or both, that you'd like to offer?
Sure. I think you should, if you want to write for children, you should really do something you're passionate about, that you enjoy, and do it with them, with the age group that you want to write for. And so the words will just come out naturally. But you'll be working with them, in contact with them, and that's where the magic happens.
Right.
So that's one way to go about it, is just spend some time with young people doing something that you care about, that you want to share with them.
Ooh, I love that. A lot of times people say read in your age group, but you're saying actually do what you want to write about, and I love that. All right. Well, thanks so much, Kari, for coming in.
Thank you, Colleen.
And if anybody would like to join us in the seat that Kari is sitting in, feel free to contact me at Colleen@theroomtowrite.org.